1/4 of a day's calories.
Cool.
And I could just stick these right in my pocket. And eat nuts out of my pocket cleanly.
Starting today, I moved in a little bit without
Hey, hey.
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
Hi, good.
Long time no see.
Yeah.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see you. Yeah.
Wow, this
This is different.
very different.
Yeah, we're doing like a kind of a spectrum essay now.
Oh, really? You have a good time in Florida?
I did.
Really?
Yes.
A lot of interesting people there?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I like the theater here
Thanks.
more than the table.
Yeah. It's surprisingly easier to set up.
Yeah, really? All right, so what's the deal here?
So I've got a few claims on the board as usual.
Okay.
And then I like to do this in a group as well. So we can have multiple people, but one-on-one is fine.
Okay.
I could go with one of these.
Okay. All right, absolutely this one. Absolutely this one.
All right, we can do that. Let's move card forward. You can stay on the neutral. Do you want to be a part of it, Dolly?
I'm happy to.
Sure.
Oh, would you like me to stand in here?
If you want.
Sure.
And then, but also do that at the same time.
Yep, I will. I'm the clipboard camera.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
I love this stuff.
I write down the reasons and things as people say them, and we can put them on the board.
I see. People are going to love this one.
All right, everyone be on the neutral.
Okay.
So you can start on the middle line. The rules are you have to stand on a line,
Okay.
but after the initial 3, 2, 1, go, feel free to move at any point as you're talking about the reasons.
Okay.
So you know where you want to go?
Yeah.
Keep it in mind. Here,
Uh-huh.
3, 2, 1, go. Disagree?
Absolutely.
And Dahlia is on agree. And the claim is the world would be a better place if Russia lost the war. And you were on strongly disagree. Why are you on this line?
I disagree because Russia and China right now are the main powers that are challenging Western imperialism and neoliberal hegemony. I also think that it's extremely unfair to single out Russia and unilaterally blame them for the invasion of Ukraine. There's an interesting article that came out the other day where people were talking about how Ukraine is sort of like the new Israel because, Israel in the Middle East is obviously a place that's very beneficial to Western interest, namely arms manufacturers, and is, amazingly belligerent to its neighboring countries. And that's really what the goal is with Ukraine. The goal was never to protect Ukraine or Ukrainian sovereignty. It was to use it as a proxy state to fight Russia. So I think Russia right now, regardless of what you think about Vladimir Putin, is certainly challenging the current world order. We see this with the creation of the BRICS alliance, where they're trying to create a new global reserve currency. And then also, if you just look at the situation in Ukraine, it could have entirely been avoided, and I blame the West on it completely, because obviously the purpose of NATO was to allegedly contain the Soviet Union, but the Soviet Union hasn't been a thing since the early 1990s, so there's really no point in NATO. And in 1994, in the Budapest Memorandum, Bill Clinton said that we would not expand NATO eastward of Germany. We clearly lied about that. We've been expanding it ever since, and we're trying to incorporate Ukraine into NATO. I'd say the other reasons for the...
Let me try to repeat back. What I'm hearing you say is there's on the West, there is aggression from that side, and it's kind of on Russia's part, self-defense for that. Is that fair?
What I'd say is that obviously those are external security threats to Russia, but the more immediate threat in terms of security is what's been going on in the eastern regions of Ukraine for the last 2 years, in the Donbass region, for example, where there's been a civil war since the 2014 Maidan coup, and Ukrainian forces, including many far-right neo-Nazi forces like the Sovboda group, the Azov battalion and right sector, have killed 14,000 Russian civilians, and those regions voted to join Russia, in 2014.
Hold that for a second.
But obviously Ukraine did not respect that wish, and instead, it's created a civil war in that region. And I think it's ahistorical to simply paint Russia as the villain right now when the civil war, started 8 years ago, and this is clearly an escalation in that conflict after Putin has tried diplomacy twice with the Minsk I and the Minsk II accords. And then the other thing I ultimately think this is about is the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Just the other day, Russia made a huge energy deal with China, and what the West was terrified of before is Russia's role in the global energy economy with Europe, because we obviously see that we've isolated Russia and China, and we've tried to weaken their role in the international economy. So I basically think right now, I wouldn't say Russia's a socialist country by any means, but it is challenging the current neoliberal world order, and I think that's a good thing.
Gotcha. I'll be right back. I'm going to get Dolly's claims.
Okay.
So here we're going to try to get some of your reasons. The West is partly responsible for it, and Russia is needed as a counter to the West. Are those fair? All right, and you take this, Dolly, and you give your reasons.
Okay. Let's see. My reasons are, I see Ukraine as a sovereign nation and is the reluctant partner in this war. Was drug into the war and therefore a defensive war. And I think that it would be better if Russia were not rewarded for that and were to have to go back and lick their wounds and stop fighting. And that would be my favorite loss. Russia loses and withdraws back across the border and sues for peace. And I think in that case, the world becomes better.
All right, these are supposed to be on the red.
Oh!
Okay.
I'm messing
Do you
up
have
the
a
color
response
code.
to that?
Sorry about that.
Yeah. What I'd say is that Ukraine has not been a sovereign country for a very long time. In 2014, after the Maidan coup, U.S. Secretary of State Victoria Nuland, at that point in time, literally selected the new president of Ukraine over the phone. And then we see, in terms of levels of democracy, Ukraine does not rank very high at all. It's not even in the top 50 freest, most democratic countries in the world. And then beyond that, I really think that Ukraine is not a sovereign country by the standards of the UN Genocide Convention, because, as I've said, they've been using Nazi forces like the Azov Battalion to massacre Russian civilians in these eastern regions. There's been daily shelling from Kiev since 2014. So for those reasons, I really can't see how Ukraine is this innocent country that was randomly invaded by Russia. I think we have to look at the historical background of the situation and why Russia did what it did, instead of just blaming them as if Ukraine is this bastion of innocence and human rights.
Gotcha. Do you understand where he's coming from?
Yeah, I think you're saying that Ukraine has disqualified themselves from sovereignty. I think that's what you mean, that they had sovereignty at one point and no longer have it? Or they did not achieve sovereignty after they left the Soviet Union? Which of those?
What I'm saying is that Ukraine became an independent state after the Soviet Union fell, but since at least 2014, they've really, more or less been a puppet state of the United States. We even saw earlier examples of this in the early 2000s when the Bush administration spent millions and millions of dollars on color revolutions against Viktor Yanukovych because he was a candidate that favored more diplomacy with Russia. And the other question I'd ask you too, when it comes to sovereignty, is do you think in 2014, when these eastern breakaway regions of Ukraine voted to overwhelmingly join Russia and leave Ukraine, do you think that they have a right to sovereignty too?
In my utopian world, yes, individual groups would have the opportunity to collectively leave. In the real world, it's not nearly so clean as that, and that can be faked. So the question of whether the southern states could secede from the United States if they voted such is an open question to me. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that sovereignty is that brittle.
Yeah, and I'd like to get a definition of sovereignty as well. What do you mean by that?
I'd say the right for a people to define their own borders, vote for their things like that, things like voting for your own politicians, deciding what system of government you want. And I'd also say basically those things. I mean, there's more like bullet points of what we typically think of when we think of sovereignty, but I'd say
Right for people to set their own borders?
yeah, the right to have self-determination about their own futures.
And
What time is it, by the way?
103.
Okay, I got some time.
Okay. Do you understand where he's coming from? Could you represent his reason?
Yeah, I mean, basically what he's saying is that that's not realistic right now. That would be in a utopian world. But I'd say what I'm struggling to understand from his perspective is why it's not realistic for it's too utopian for the Donbass regions, the wannabe independent republics of Luhansk and Donetsk, why it's too utopian for them to have political sovereignty, but it's not when it comes to Ukraine, because it seems like in this situation, one person's right to sovereignty, being Ukraine, clearly exceeds these Russian-speaking people's right to sovereignty. So it seems like we have a very clear double standard when it comes to applying notions of sovereignty.
Okay. Let me have you repeat back your main reason real quick, just to make sure I get it.
My main reason, I think sovereignty isn't as brittle. I don't think it's as easily changed as like one vote or referendum. I think it's something that it's not up to us to say you've disqualified yourself because you didn't grant a subgroup sovereignty. Therefore, I still see them as sovereign nation, even if we disagree with their choices internally. I just have a different standard of what it takes to disqualify from sovereignty.
So Ukraine is a sovereign nation, and sovereign nations, what's the assumption with that?
Oh, and sovereign nations are just in defending their own borders. So that goes to the justness of the war, or whether it would be better if Russia lost and withdrew.
Okay, let's go to the board real quick. Here.
Yes.
So that's your reason. And the assumption that with that was what? Sovereign nations are allowed to defend their borders.
Yes, sovereign nations it is just for a sovereign nation to defend their borders. So, I guess I'm saying just, but maybe that's not important to the original claim. Is the world a better place if Russia lost the war? It's kind of related.
Sure.
Sorry if I'm not being completely on topic.
It's okay.
Like that's how it would be in my mind. Okay. Feel free to take one of these magnets, and if you think any of these are false, Dolly, you can put a red on here, or if you think any of these are false.
Oh, I should say true false?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or accurate, or good.
I question that one. I'm fine with the notion of a balance of power, and I explicitly reject that one. Here.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, we disagree about that, but that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is just
Now,
general,
if-
not necessarily
If
Ukraine.
there was a sovereign nation that wasn't Ukraine, so pick a sovereign nation, is it just that they would defend their borders?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I understand that obviously without this, that has no power.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which reason on your side has the most weight?
Yeah, and then we didn't really get to them. There's a couple more reasons too, but
What's missing? Yeah, you can replace them.
okay. I mean, the other 2 points.
Talk into that.
The other 2 points I'd also make are that the closer either side gets to losing, the higher the prospects of a thermonuclear holocaust.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think that's pretty terrifying.
I'm waiting for you to put that one up. So
I
can
think
upload it.
I think that's pretty terrifying.
If Russia lost the
if
war,
you live on planet Earth, I'd say so. The
Yeah, if we push
closer
her
any
under
side
corner, they might
gets to
nuke
losing, the greater the likelihood of nuclear war. And
That's
then
a
the
good
other
reason.
thing is,
That's a good-
That's a good reason.
right now, even in the West, the sanctions that we've put on the West are not working to weaken Russia. The ruble now is much stronger than it was at the beginning of the war. Instead, it's actually having the reverse effect, and it's creating an energy crisis all throughout Europe since even before the war. 40% of fuel in a lot of European countries came from Russia, and now we have leaders in the UK saying you might not have heat this winter. Gas prices are obviously way up in the United States, and we see this detrimental cost when it comes to the livelihood of people in the West. And then the other thing I'd say is that the more we're spending insane amounts of money. We spent almost like $70 billion to finance, Ukraine, to send them weapons, to fight Russia. And to me, as an anti-imperialist, I think that's horrible. I think you're only making the military-industrial complex much stronger. I think Julian Assange said it best when he was talking about the war in Afghanistan. The goal of these wars is not to end the war, it's to have a forever war where we can finance and send as much money to the military-industrial complex as possible for the longest time possible. War is the health of the state. So I see those are a couple of reasons as well, but there's a lot more, but I'll wrap it up.
Okay, that's quite a lot, yeah. See, I think the main contention I'd love to talk about is that one.
Sure, yeah.
Because that's... Did you put that there, Dolly? Yeah.
Yes.
But you're saying that's true, and you're probably saying that's...
Yes.
You're saying that's true.
Yes.
So that's something to talk about.
Yeah, we each have a positive and negative vote on
Sure,
this.
sure.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe we could pick it up there potentially some other time, or if you have time, we can keep going on that.
Sure. I mean, I guess we can tackle the sovereign nation question a little bit.
Let's go back to neutral.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so Ukraine is a sovereign nation. Do you know where you want to go for that? Have it in mind?
Sure.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, go. Strongly disagree and agree. So about the same spots for the main claim. All right, and the sovereign nation sovereignty is about right for people to set their own borders and have self-determination. You agree with that definition?
Yes.
Okay, and that's the best definition. Anything else to add to that?
I think that's fine for now.
Okay. Why is Ukraine not a country that has the right for people to set their own borders and self-determination? You can hold that.
One reason is that Ukraine's claim to right of self-determination depends on taking that right away from regions in eastern Ukraine that voted and had a referendum to join Russia. And what I'd say is, if you still think Ukraine is a sovereign nation, international law disagrees with you. I don't know what else to say about that. Under Article 51 of the UN Charter, these two breakaway regions had the undeniable right to join Russia after the vast majority of people in those populations, over 85%, wanted to join the Russian Federation. And what I'd say too is that the people of Ukraine, after the 2014 Maidan coup, did not even choose their own president. Okay, U.S. Secretary of State Victoria Nuland picked the president of Ukraine. I don't think anybody can argue that a country is truly sovereign when another power decides who the president of that country is.
No. Hey,
and then there's all kinds of other examples of how Ukraine is not sovereign, by standards of international law. They're extremely pro-censorship. They even banned the letter Z, for example, because they said, that's Russian propaganda. So we see insane attacks on freedom of speech, and it's even argue that you can make the argument that they've violated the genocide convention by using these neo-Nazi forces like the Azov Battalion to kill thousands of ethnic Russians in these eastern regions. So what I'd say is, I think Ukraine is a fascistic state. I think Vladimir Zelensky is a dictator, and none of those things, to me, remotely remind me of what a sovereign country looks like.
Could you give me examples of other countries? I've got this. We should be good.
Of other countries,
of other countries that you think are equally or at least that bad, or I should say, in your mind, have their sovereignty revoked?
I think in countries, I mean, people say that they're sovereign, but I think by a lot of these standards have surrendered their sovereignty.
Okay.
At least according to me, absolutely Israel.
Okay.
I think Israel's a rogue terrorist state. I'd say Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
I mean, I think by these standards too, it's like, what are you going to do? How pragmatic is it at the point? But just for the sake of applying things to these standards, the United States has violated the Genocide Convention, obviously. I mean, there's different reasoning behind it, but Taiwan is not a country.
Okay.
So those are countries, just a few I'd say, I don't think are sovereign.
Okay, is this a fair assumption connected to the reason regions in Ukraine voted to break away and join Russia? I think an assumption is that, like, if a region in a country votes to break away, that reduces, like, its country's sovereignty. Is that this connecting assumption with that?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I think that's like,
okay, that
in
sounds,
terms of just like,
I think that's logic.
Principle. But I do think, in terms of like practice, when we talk about like real power politics in the real world, Ukraine is not being a sovereign country right now.
Okay, can we go back to neutral and
Sure.
focus on this claim? Go back to neutral, Dolly.
Neutral. Yes.
Okay.
Which claim?
If a region in a country votes to break away, that reduces the country's sovereignty overall? Do you have that? Does that make sense?
Okay, I think I understand. At least I can make examples like hypotheticals, so I think I understand that.
Okay.
claim.
Yeah.
Cool.
Know where you want to go?
Yes.
3, 2, 1, go.
What's the claim?
If a region in a country votes to break away, that reduces its sovereignty, its country's sovereignty.
Of the whole country?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The region and the country.
So you're agree?
Yeah, I mean, there's just different real world examples of this case by case, so that's why I'd say in some areas, it's kind of tough.
Okay. Why are you
About it.
here, Dolly?
I disagree that if a parent nation allows a subgroup to leave, that parent nation loses any sovereignty over the remaining territory.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
I mean, the thing is this goes both ways. So, by that very own standard, Russia had sovereignty over these two eastern regions of Ukraine. So I just find that extremely troubling, especially when it comes to the context of this debate. I guess what I'd also say is that I mean, you know, when it comes to a lot of other historical examples, I think people would be, you know, hard pressed to say, for example, that under Saddam Hussein, the Kurds didn't have their own right to sovereignty, or when, you know, Israel controls 83% of the West Bank, that Palestinians don't have their own right to sovereignty. So I just find a lot of really troubling examples when it comes to that, when a right to sovereignty is arbitrary, as one people saying they have a right to sovereignty over another people.
Okay. How would the Civil War, the American Civil War, with the South receding, I assume they had a consensus, maybe not through a vote, but through a consensus, they wanted to break away from the United States. Did that reduce the sovereignty of the United States at that time?
I don't think so, because, I mean, people are like, oh, the Civil War about like states' rights, like a states' right to what, you know? I think the Civil War was ultimately about, you know, slavery, and I think that ultimately makes it, you know, an illegitimate secession. But on the other hand, I think
But it's their self-determination to keep slaves.
there's self-determination to keep slaves.
Maybe that could be a reason they would give.
Yeah, but I mean, you could say that, but I think you have to also say that their self-determination means taking away other people's self-determination, right?
True.
So I mean, that's what I think about that. I mean, I think there's other examples, like if you want to talk about American history, the American Revolution. I think 1776 was about gaining back political rights that were usurped by King James. But I just think that it's qualitatively different than what the Civil War was about.
Cool.
Cool, yeah.
Sweet. I think we've explored a lot of this.
I think we have, yeah. This is really cool, though.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Any any last questions or last thing to say, Doug?
No, I'm good. I thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I understand where you're coming from, and I understand where we disagree.
Okay, cool. Thank you, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I love the new setup.
Appreciate it. So hopefully we can continue
Is this on
doing.
Twitch right now?
No, we're not streaming.
We're not live.
Practice.
Oh well, we're recording for edit.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yep.
Nice. Is it going on the Cordial Curiosity Clips channel?
Yeah, potentially.
All right.
Is that cool?
Yeah, that's very cool.
Sweet. All right.
All right.
Did you already have those puzzle pieces, I assume?
Oh yeah, I have some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've collected them.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, Riley.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure thing.
All right. Have a good day.
Am I correct? There's a restroom around that way into the.
I'm sure there's one inside this UCLA store somewhere.
I will be back in a few minutes.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, later.
Bye.